You're looking to cut through the noise, get to the heart of a story, and, come away feeling truly informed. Right?
Absolutely.
That's exactly what we're doing today. We're diving deep into a pretty pivotal moment for India. The 50th anniversary of its very first satellite, Aryabhata, launched way back on April 19th, 1975.
And our guide for this journey, our source material, is a really compelling recent article from the Indian Express.
Right.
It does more than just, report the history. It really digs into the human side of it.
The challenges, the innovation.
Exactly. The sheer grit, really, that define the whole achievement.
Absolutely. So our mission today isn't just marking a date on the calendar.
No.
We want to unpack the story, the surprising bits, the twists and turns, understand the people involved, the visionaries.
And the real obstacles they had to overcome. It wasn't straightforward.
Not at all. We're going beyond the headlines, really, to understand the launch of Aryabhata from the ground up. Okay, so 1975, it might seem like ages ago now.
It does.
But it was the absolute dawn, the very beginning of India's satellite program.
It really was. And naming it Aryabhata, that wasn't random.
Yeah.
It was a very deliberate choice. Linking this huge technological leap they were attempting to India's deep scientific roots, honoring the famous 5th century astronomer.
Okay. That makes sense.
And what's striking right from the start is that while the satellite was, conceived and built in India.
It wasn't launched from India.
Yeah, exactly. It had to travel quite a distance.
All the way to the Soviet Union, launching from their Kapustin Yar Cosmodrome.
On a Soviet rocket, the Interkosmos rocket. A real early example of international collaboration in space.
It really is. And here's a detail that honestly still amazes me.
What's that?
Just half an hour after liftoff, 30 minutes. The first signals were picked up by the Indian ground station at Sriharikota.
Which was, what, 5,000 kilometers away?
Something like that. 5,000 kilometers away. That points to some serious planning, right?
It really does. It highlights the foresight, the groundwork that was already happening.
Even before India could launch its own satellites.
Right. Of course, India wasn't completely new to rocketry. They had the Rohini-sounding rocket experiments at Thumba.
Started back in the 60s, yeah.
But designing, building, and actually operating a full satellite, that was a significant step up, a whole different ballgame.
So they needed help. And the Soviet Union, through this Interkosmos program.
Which was basically a Soviet initiative offering space research collaboration to friendly nations.
Okay. That became the key partnership.
This 1972 agreement was crucial. The Soviets agreed to launch an Indian-made satellite within 2 or 3 years.
Seems pretty smooth on the surface, right?
Yeah.
A nice partnership.
Well.
But then you look at the timing, the geopolitics, and things get interesting.
Very interesting, because just 2 years later, 1974...
Arkwin, India's first nuclear test.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that had major international ripples. Sanctions followed, particularly from the U.S.
Right. And that must have made getting certain, crucial technologies much harder for Aryabhata.
Undoubtedly. It added a whole layer of complexity. Suddenly, acquiring the necessary technical bits and pieces wasn't so easy.
You can just imagine the pressure that created. And this leads to a fascinating little detail in the article.
Oh, yeah.
This suggestion by Pramod Kale to maybe rebrand the program.
Yes. Rename it the Indian Scientific Satellite Program.
Yeah. What was the thinking there, too? Maybe sort of downplay the Soviet connection? Reduce scrutiny?
It certainly seems plausible. It gives you a real glimpse into that delicate balance, doesn't it?
Between the science goals and the politics of the day.
Absolutely. It shows the determination to push forward, but also having to navigate this really complex international situation.
And this period also saw a big strategic shift for ISRO itself, right? Where they were based.
Yes, exactly. ISRO's early days were near Thiruvananthapuram.
Down south, coastal area.
Right. But the article points out that coastal environment, maybe not ideal for the super delicate work of building satellites.
Like humidity, salt in the air, that kind of thing?
Probably, especially with sensitive instruments, the need for extremely clean facilities, clean rooms.
Okay, so they decided to move key activities somewhere else.
To Bangalore, which offered, quite a few advantages.
Like what?
Established industries nearby, like Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, HAL.
Access to engineering, manufacturing.
Exactly. Potential synergies, a skilled workforce, resources readily available. It was a strategic move.
And this led to setting up the ISRO Satellite Systems project in Pune.
Which was becoming a major industrial and tech hub even back then.
And Pina is where the real work, the nuts and bolts of building Aryabhata happened.
Under the leadership of U.R. Rao, a really key figure.
Definitely a name to remember. He led this team, about 200 people.
Roughly 200 engineers, scientists, designing and actually constructing Aryabhata there.
And the article gives a description of the satellite itself. Pretty unique design.
It was a 26-sided shape, sort of quasi-spherical, weighed about 358 kilograms.
Not huge by today's standards, but significant then. And what was it designed to do? What were the scientific goals?
The design was really driven by the science it carried. 3 main experiments on board.
Oh.
One was focused on X-ray astronomy, which was still a relatively new field then.
Right.
Another was looking at solar neutrons and gamma rays.
Okay.
And the third was dedicated to studying the Earth's upper atmosphere, the ionosphere.
So pretty ambitious science in the very first mission.
Definitely.
Right.
It shows that India wasn't just trying to build a satellite. They had clear scientific questions they wanted to answer right from the start.
It's fascinating trying to picture the scene in Pina back then, the mid-70s.
Yeah.
The article shares this great little anecdote from someone named S. Radhakrishnan.
Oh, the person who worked nearby.
Yeah, worked in a factory close by. He remembers seeing these ISRO engineers working in what looked like basically a shed.
Huh. No idea the pioneering work happening inside.
Totally unaware. And he also recalls seeing Prime Minister Indira Gandhi visiting the site several times.
Which really highlights the national importance, the political backing.
Absolutely. What does that kind of local ground-level view tell us?
It just grounds it, doesn't it? This huge national project comes down to dedicated people working hard, sometimes in pretty basic conditions.
Yeah.
And Indira Gandhi's visits, that shows the strong political will behind it, which was, crucial for overcoming all the challenges they faced.
And the challenges included building the infrastructure itself, right?
Right.
In Pina.
Oh, absolutely. The article details that. They basically had to create everything from scratch.
Like what kind of things?
Advanced electronics labs, the critical clean room for assembly, specialized labs for thermal testing, control systems testing.
Antenna ranges?
Antenna testing ranges, yeah. It was a huge effort just to build the place to build a satellite.
An entire ecosystem, really.
Yeah.
And then the testing of the satellite itself sounds incredibly thorough.
It was. The prototypes went through, almost 30 months of testing?
Wow, 2.5 years.
Yeah. Simulating the harsh environment of space in a thermovacuum chamber.
Okay.
Shaking it violently, hitting it with shock tests to mimic the launch forces.
Trying to break it, basically, before launch.
Pretty much. And they even did that unusual helicopter test over Sriharikota.
Right. Why the helicopter?
To check the communication link. To make absolutely sure they could talk to it once it was up there.
That's creative.
Yeah.
What were they hoping to learn from all these different tests?
It just shows this incredibly meticulous approach. Trying to identify any potential weakness.
De-risking the mission as much as humanly possible.
Exactly. And even before the helicopter, remember, they did balloon tests.
Oh, yeah.
Sending instruments up to maybe 25 kilometers, testing communication links even higher, like 400 kilometers up.
Wow. Layers upon layers of testing. Yeah. Really underscores their commitment.
It does. And all this was happening while simultaneously they were developing the ground systems back in Bangalore.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
Building the satellite is one thing.
But you need to track it, talk to it, get the data back.
Right. The whole ground infrastructure.
Including setting up the main mission operations and control center, the nerve center, right there in Pina.
Okay, so launch day comes April 19th, 1975. It goes up.
And those first signals come back within minutes. Huge success right there.
A massive relief, I bet. But
yeah,
there was a bit of a setback, wasn't there, with the science experiments?
Yeah, unfortunately. The article mentions a power failure on board after a few days.
Oh, no.
Which meant the main scientific experiments, the X-ray astronomy and others, had to be essentially called off.
Ah, that must have been a huge disappointment after all that work.
For the scientists involved, absolutely. But, crucially, the mission itself was far from a failure.
Because the technological side still worked.
Exactly. The experiments focused on the technology, testing the telecommand systems, the data transmission. Those were a resounding success.
So they proved they could control the satellite, send it instructions.
And receive data back from it reliably, yes.
And this is where you really see the connection to today, right? The beginnings of satellite communication in India.
Absolutely. The seeds were sown right there. The article points to some key demonstrations they did with Aryabhata.
Like what?
Transmitting a recorded voice message for the first time from Sriharikota to Bangalore via the satellite.
Wow.
And even transmitting ECG signals, medical data.
Really? Back in 75, that's quite forward thinking.
Looking back, yeah, they seem like clear indicators of the potential, the future possibilities.
And didn't they also work with the Met Department?
Yes, collaboration with the India Meteorological Department, using a data collection platform on the ground that transmitted weather data up through Aryabhata.
Showing practical applications right away.
Exactly. Beyond just pure science or tech demonstration. And when you just think about the complexity, over 12,000 electronic components inside, 20,000 solar cells powering it.
25,000 interconnections.
25,000 connections linking everything together. It was a truly remarkable piece of engineering for its time.
And a powerful demonstration, wasn't it, of India's own capabilities?
Indigenous capabilities in designing satellites, building them, testing them, and handling the ground control.
It wasn't just a satellite launch. It was, like you said, a statement.
A statement of intent, of capability. Aryabhata proved India could do this complex stuff.
Design, fabricate, test, operate, the whole package.
A whole package. And as the article rightly notes, this first success really paved the way
for everything that came after.
Look at ISRO now. What is it? 131 satellites built in total?
And 51 currently operational in orbit, doing all sorts of crucial things.
It speaks volumes about the legacy that started with that first single step, Aryabhata.
So looking back at this whole story, what are the big takeaways for you?
Well, the surprising speed of that initial contact, getting the signals back so fast.
Yeah, that stands out.
The resilience, too.
Yeah.
Facing down those tech hurdles, the geopolitical pressures.
And still getting it done.
The sheer ingenuity. Building everything, the satellite, the ground systems, practically from scratch in Pina.
And just its undeniable role as the foundation. The launch pad for India's entire space program, which is so formidable today.
Couldn't agree more. And it makes you think, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, consider that journey, starting with heavy reliance on international help for the launch.
Right, the Soviet launch vehicle.
And then rapidly developing this incredibly robust, independent, indigenous capability across the board.
Yeah.
What does that story, the Aryabhata story, tell us about the future for any nation getting into space?
You mean the balance between working together and doing it yourself?
Exactly. How do nations weigh the benefits of collaboration against the strategic need to build their own independent capabilities in something as critical as space?
That blend of early partnership and determined self-reliance.
It's definitely something to mull over, isn't it? A really compelling question.